class today is obviously the final one. It's really kind of the odds and ends almost. I got to put some things in order, get myself organized a little bit. It's a lot of odds and ends, but also a lot of review. So I think this is a good time, good class to ask questions and whatever if there's anything that's confusing. So we'll talk about the garden site assessment, and then kind of how you put all that together when you have a site assessment. But again, the garden assessment is just kind of doing all the classes we've gone over, putting that to an actual site. What do you think? And we will have a little cost analysis, a very simple one in the middle, and then we'll talk about the certification, which should be reviewed from the very first lecture. Nothing's really different there. So just to start with the garden assessment, or site assessment, however you want to refer to it. Basically, when you first go to a client's house and you're meeting them and their garden for the first time, you're really trying to assess and figure out, like, how much time is this going to take you to maintain this garden, and how much are you going to charge? Like, how much is it going to cost? And also getting a gist for the owner and their priorities and needs and values, like what is it that they want from their garden. So this is like, basically, I think a solid detailed site assessment is the first step towards getting answers to those questions. So having a nice site assessment where you have all the information about the site that you're visiting is just the first way to get really down to, like, okay, how long is this going to take me, or what are the main activities I'm going to need to do in this garden, and what is it that this owner is interested in, really, because in the end it is their garden, and you do have to do things that make sense to them. So on page 135 of your student handbook, there is this sheet. I know it's kind of like pixelated-y, but you have your own version. I'm just going to go through this what's it called? Site assessment. They call it a client landscape evaluation form, but I'm calling it a site assessment for just for my own ease of talking. And I'm just going to go through this thing in a little bit of detail. We have basically a slide for each of these things on this checklist. Obviously, this is just kind of the general information, the client, and then the address and when you visited. And then we're going to get into this checklist, which it's 3 pages. And one thing, though, before I get into the checklist, I want to say is this is a very basic one, a very basic template. And there's a lot of extra things you could add here or subtract to whatever makes sense for you. But I do think some general site assessment is helpful, or some kind of checklist that you have is always really helpful. And one of the things that and I should just mention, I would take photos at this point too, like take photos upon visiting. There's no kind of reminder on this checklist, but definitely I would say, like, remind myself to take photos. It's always good to have those before shots. And if you're looking back at the garden for whatever reason when you're not in front of it, it's always nice to have those. And yeah, just always having the before photos. So some things that are not on this checklist that I would add are things like curb appeal, which is sort of the same as the overall appearance. But I guess in general, all the things I would add are things that are kind of like the client's, the specifics to the clients. This is a checklist of all the kind of garden things like soil and plants and irrigation, but it doesn't really have anything about like what the client wants and maybe what they value, or what they're expressing to you as an important thing. So those are the things I would add, which is, like I said, something about curb appeal, which is here. You can see just overall appearance. Does it look good or not is kind of the options here. But curb appeal can also just be like, is the garden representing native plant gardens well? Because like we do want to combat that like misconception that native gardens are messy and weedy. So that's one thing. But also, does this client have like an HOA and rules and regulations about how their garden should look? That's something that should be on there. So the client kind of curb appeal is, how does it look from the street, and how do they want it to look? How do they feel about how it looks, not just how you feel. Then there's also kind of the idea of like sustainability. Is that important to the client? Like not just in terms of, water saving, but maybe the use of chemicals. obviously with native plants, we are trying to encourage habitats and, encourage that part of native gardens that they're basically like a little ecosystem that you're planting with that will attract wildlife and pollinators and all the good stuff. But that might not be a priority for the client. It may, but you should find out, so sustainability, is that important? Water savings, or yeah, not using chemicals, or what is it? Is that what's on their radar? Also just nature in general, like, are they a bird lover? Are they, is it really important that their garden is wildlife habitat, or are they on the more of the, I really just want it to look pretty all year long, and I want it to look neat, or I maybe want it to have flowers all year long, like getting like down to like what is their I guess like values or priorities with the garden. And then lastly, there's a little bit of a checklist thing on this later, but how do they use the garden? If it's their backyard, front yard, is it just visual? Is it to relax in? Is it, do they entertain people in this area? Is it a play zone for kids and pets? Like, how do they use the space? Because those are really important, obviously important factors to the client because they affect them the most. So we don't want to just have our site assessment be just strictly like what we're seeing in the garden and plants. You definitely want to include the client's needs and what they're focusing on. So definitely repeat back to them what you're hearing them talk about. Okay, so now the following slides are just going to be these. You can follow along with your site assessment, your own, but we're basically just going to go through all of these little checklist items. So plants, or sorry, no, we're going to start with age of the garden. I forgot that. This is where it really should be review for you guys, but I guess all just reminders too, which is essentially, the age of the garden. It should be clear by this point that the first couple years of the garden is it being established. So you definitely want to know, well, okay, step back a little bit, Claire. The first 3 years are when it's establishing, and those first 3 years, we have different tasks, like we might be irrigating more frequently, or we might be irrigating and tapering off. That's kind of the idea with establishing plants. Also, weeding is usually, more of an activity in the first 3 years. That structural, more formal pruning is more of a mature garden thing. So definitely knowing the age of the garden, knowing if it's young or not, or a mix. Definitely if you're like, hey, some plants are brand new, some are not. That's going to be important to know, especially for irrigation, because as we've talked about, the newer ones, you want to irrigate more frequently and taper them off. But the more mature ones will probably have their own irrigation schedule that you don't want mixing with the young plants. So definitely there is a difference here, with kind of a more traditional turf garden with some ornamental plants and whatever. They pretty much look the same the year, and you can treat them the same almost when you put them in at install to 3 years down the line. So that's a difference from conventional gardens. And yeah, if you don't know what the age is, obviously you can just ask the client, but if you don't know, figure it out based off of, is it full size? Is this a mature size of the plant? All of those should be pretty obvious things that you can figure out. Then there's just plants, like this category of plants, which first of all, like if you have a plant list, great. But I should say most owners don't. Unless you installed it, you have one, they're great to have. But just, yeah, a list of all the plants that are there. I personally don't really do, well, I have a checklist like this, like a site assessment, but I always have the map of the site with me. So whatever, if it's just a printed out Google Earth image, fine. Or if it's an architect's plan, great. But I always like to have the map with me, and I go out on that map identifying the plants that I see. And anything you can't identify, take a picture of. I mean, you should be taking pictures anyway, but take pictures of those you can't identify and figure them out later with iNaturalist or, Calscape or whatever else, a nerdy plant friend. Definitely, yeah, take note of where all the plants are, and any major trees, I would definitely note, and their shade, obviously, like this is a big tree, a big old tree, like a big sycamore or something. And of course, any like big features definitely want to note too, if there's just something, I've seen some weird things in people's yards that you're like, what is this, trash, art? Like, I'm not sure. And just make sure you find out and, know what it's for and what it's used for. And, but I guess that's kind of outside of plants, but either way. Then you want to look at like the plant health overall. Do they look good? Are they stressed out? Is there a pest issue? Is there disease issues? Do you see a bunch of dying plants? Like, this is all stuff that you're taking note of. And then also the other plants that aren't natives, like non-native plants for sure. I would note, maybe like a percentage of non-natives to natives, and invasive species for sure. That invasive species or just a weed problem in general, take note of those. They are all plants, so you want to take note of who's where. And it might be, especially with invasive plants, it might be a nice opportunity for education for the client, especially if they're on that like wildland interface, because that's like these invasive plants, like castor bean or pampas grass or whatever, they can kind of drool into and jump ship and get into our wild areas. So that might be something you want to educate the client on about their invasive plants, because some people plant those invasive plants on purpose. I know, it's shocking, but and what else? Also, I was going to say, plants like maybe are the plants appropriate? Are they appropriate for the site? Are you seeing like a lot of dying plants, but you think it's just because it's a bunch of sun-loving plants in the shade, or vice versa? Or again, if they're on that wildland urban interface and you see a lot of flammable plants, like chamise, which is kind of has like volatile oils in it that make it quite flammable. Maybe it's not the best native plant for that area, or just invasive plant, so you can plant more fire retardant plants that are native. I mean, they're not fireproof, but there are certain ones that do better, like lemonade berry. They have like usually kind of like more of a evergreen and like almost, I wouldn't want to say leathery, but lemonade berry does have kind of a leathery leaf type to it. Okay, so plants anyway. What also then lastly, you want to definitely note like what is their actual current maintenance? Are they being pruned? Are they missing out on that tip pinching? Like, what are you noticing in terms of maintenance or lack thereof? And definitely take note of it, especially if they're overplanted, because that can lead to issues and definitely health issues for the plants. So that's kind of your plant, category. Then there's these three categories here. I don't have slides for these three because they're pretty simple, but shade, definitely note that. Like I said, I like to just have it on the map, and I just literally just kind of make the hash marks where the shade is. From neighboring trees too, you want to keep that in mind, and also any neighboring structures, anything that's casting a lot of shade. And that's also why on the map I would note like if it's north facing or south facing, because the north facing yards are going to have more shade all year round, or at least in the winter. And then south facing yards are going to have pretty much full sun all year, unless there's something obstructing it. So that's something I would definitely note with the shade. Water features, it could be small stuff like fountains and bird baths. Those are helpful for wildlife. So noting if they have those, and maybe a dry riverbed like a seasonal stream, or an infiltration basin like or a rain garden. Definitely taking note of these, because this is something you're going to maintain too, which is like a rain garden. A lot of times they'll have some water source that's being directed to them, maybe not, but a lot of times people route their roof gutters to, or at least towards that rain garden. So you want to make sure that the inlets and outlets to the rain gardens are functional and clear for water to flow. So put it on there, because it might be an important feature to maintain while you're maintaining the plants. Then lastly is the outdoor rooms, which is kind of like under the umbrella of how they use their garden. So if they have, maybe the non-garden space or the non-planted space is, what surfaces are they? Is it a patio? Is it a deck? Is it just, a blank area of DG that they just like open? What is the surface that is outside near the plants, and how close to the plants are they? Just how do they use the space really is how I think of this one. And are the plants appropriate? Again, is it like a space with a fire pit? Maybe I don't want to plant a bunch of grass and chamise all around it. Or, is it a play area? Maybe I want to not have the, brittle kind of monkey flower type or buckwheats. I don't want to have those on the edge, so kind of keeping that in mind. Next is soil and mulch. I have a slide for that one. Again, this should be review. But, you know, when you're looking at the soil, you could do a drainage test, but you don't have to, unless, I think you can kind of figure out, you can definitely feel the soil, you know, do the kind of texture by feel test, and looking for signs of clay or slow draining soils or compacted soils, look for clues. And or looking for signs of erosion. I mean, all of that, you're just looking for signs that of you know, soil movement or lack of drainage, or, you know, something like that. And, you know, with the erosion, you'll probably see gullies or, you know, runoff, like little, you know, the kind of silty material that you see. You'll, you know, looking for all of those signs, because, for example, with the erosion, you could plant accordingly. You know, a lot of our chaparral plants are great with erosion, like white sage, what else? Oh, buckwheats, you know, like California buckwheat, that one's great. Artemisia californica is another one that's great for erosion. Ceanothus also, so you can plant accordingly. You don't, again, it's all about that right plant for the right space. So right now you're defining the space, like what's going on in this space so that I can plant accordingly. And then yeah, this is, I guess, well, so yeah, if you have a clay soil, definitely remember, there's that handout with the plants for heavy soils, so that can be, you know, your friend. And then this part here, which is kind of all about like the high and low points, I like to just, again, think of like I like to have on the map and kind of think of the garden or the landscape that you're tending as its own watershed. So how does the water move on this little watershed, on this little stamp of land? So always I note the high and low points, and like basic, you know, basic kind of how the water flows on the site. Because usually, you know, especially in a lot of front yards in LA all drain to the street, you know, they were built that way. So, you know, just having that in mind, you know, how the water actually moves on the site, because a lot of times those draining to the street, you could use a swale or a berm to spread that water out more on the site so that you kind of capture it in the soil as opposed to it running off. So there's ways to use the soil, or like, you know, in terms of berms or swales or whatever, to kind of capture more water if you want, or move water that's collecting in one area to another zone. So there's definitely lots of options, or, you know, just planting it appropriately. You don't have to move water around. If you just have a lot of water in one spot, just plant riparian species. And then mulch, of course. What kind is it? Is it deep enough? You know, is it at least at 3 inches? Is it doing its job? Is it appropriate for the plants? Or is it, you know, too, maybe organic mulch on desert plants isn't the appropriate mulch. You know, they kind of prefer that more DG and high drainage type mulch. Then there is irrigation. So first of all, I would say, this is kind of like with soil for me, they're very intertwined. Like, again, knowing how the water moves on the site, I think is really important. And, you know, if it's not obvious how it moves, you know, ask the owner where they see water pooling, you know, when it rains a lot, is there flooding areas? If there's no obvious kind of like indications of erosion or flooding or something, or runoff, you know, obviously you can just ask the owner, but usually you can kind of tell. And, also, if they have an irrigation system, I would definitely check it, you know, see if it works. And, you know, just ask them about their current water use. Is it, you know, you want to know if it's appropriate for the garden they have. Maybe they want to transition to native plants, so you can explain to them the difference in watering and what to expect if they were to transition over. And yeah, does the irrigation system work, and does it work well? You know, does it work well for the site? You know, I think the next page, there's a thing about the irrigation controller. So is it outdated? Is it an appropriate irrigation controller? Maybe they're up for an upgrade, and, you know, maybe they can qualify for that rebate. You know, finding out if their controller offers greater than 7-day intervals for watering schedules, because maybe it's outdated or not appropriate for native plants. So might as well update it. This is the last and third page, which, okay, yes. Speaking of, they have this little checklist of eligible rebates, which is great. You know, if you're an LA DWP jurisdiction, you might want to remind them of any of the rebates that were covered in this by Martha. There's one of them's missing, which is like the flow meter one. I think that's not on here. And then lastly, you have this category of overall garden grade, which giving the garden a grade, basically off of everything you've just seen. And I think that's something I mean, I have to say, myself included, forget to do, but is very helpful, because you might do a site assessment and then actually have to send the estimate or something like that much later down the line, or who knows. And you think you'll remember exactly what your thoughts were about the garden, but you don't always. So I think it's good to put on the site assessment, like basically categorize it into like easy, medium, or hard. How hard is this going to be to maintain? Or in this case, it has healthy, needs work, or needs major improvement. And that's just a way for you to, essentially identify, it's just a way for you to kind of get a more accurate estimate, because if it's healthy, it's going to have no major issues. It's going to have most of the canopy filled out, and the irrigation system is appropriate and works well for the system without overwatering it. You don't have any pest issues or weed issues. That would be healthy. So that might be kind of the easiest option. That's going to be the cheapest probably for you to maintain. And then there's needs work, which is just one major focus area, for your services, is like, needs work. So that would be the irrigation, or maybe there's a weed problem, or maybe there's a IPM, pest problem. And then needs major improvement is like more than one issue is present, or the budget's really limited, or maybe this needs to get done fast because they have some kind of HOA or inspection or something like that that's coming up. So it's kind of like that project management triangle that's like things done quickly, done cheaply, or done, what is it? Done quickly, done cheaply, or what's the other one? You guys must know that one. I'm done cheap. Or, high quality, so done well. So it's like you can really only pick two. So I would just say, just make sure to just give it some kind of grade, some way of categorizing that, like where it lands in terms of how difficult it will be for you to maintain. I think, let's see. Yeah, we have like this is kind of fun, or at least I like it, which is, I guess I'll explain real quick, which is we're going to use that checklist. So like you can look at your checklist, or just, from memory, to kind of look at some pictures of gardens. So I need some participation. So I know you guys are feeling shy, but the whole point is you participate. So we're going to look at some photos of gardens, and I want you to basically either give them a grade, using this kind of rubric, or just, tell me what you're seeing in terms of the different checklist items. So you can note the differences, note maybe how you would approach the gardens differently based off of the time differences. So here's the same garden, but one is a picture of it newly installed, and one is of it more than 2 years later. And you can see there's a difference, but how would you maybe approach them differently? Or what are we noticing about this? Like, we're pretending we're doing a site assessment. So how would you, what are you noting on your checklist? Or what kind of grade would you give it? You guys got to unmute yourselves and participate. Also, okay, first of all, can anyone identify some of these plants? Does anyone have any, like, what are these in the front? They have this very specific type of leaf that's kind of feathery. And
is it yarrow?
Yes, this is yarrow. Great. Did you want to share any of your ideas, or just identify plants? You're welcome to do both.
I mean, I guess I'm noticing that it's mostly native plants, although it's incredibly sparse. It's kind of hard to tell, but it looks like there's some rainwater features. I'm seeing some like, the rain chain, and then there's like.
Are you talking about this?
Yeah. I can't see it super well.
It kind of looks like an indentation, like it's potentially an infiltration basin or some kind of rain garden. Yeah, I'm seeing that too, for sure. And the rain chain gives me the hint.
Yeah, I can't really tell much about the irrigation system from looking at this.
Right.
I don't know. I would say it's so sparse. It looks healthy-ish, but maybe needs work.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Oh, okay. My mouse is doing that thing again. Yeah, it's kind of sparse, maybe. but also important to know when they're newly installed that they do look more sparse, because you can see in the next photo, definitely fills out. So here's this rock here. This rock is that rock. And this here, does anyone know what this is? You can see the kind of flowers on it there.
The ceanothus.
Yeah, ceanothus, thank you. So that ceanothus is this here. So it fills out it really takes up quite a bit of space. And you can see here, this plant is this plant here, and this plant here is this one. Does you guys, anyone familiar with either of these?
Is it kind of buckwheat? Kind of buckwheat?
On the right here, this one? This one is a buckwheat.
Okay.
Does anyone know which one it is?
Is
that the giganteum?
Yeah, yes. It gets these giant flower clusters on it, and it's got those big leaves.
And then the other like grayish one, it looks like there's little yellow flowers. Is that the Abutilon palmarii?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's the common name is Indian mallow. So yeah, that's great. I can't really tell what that is. But there is, in this like later photo, there's some plants that weren't here in this one. So they obviously did add some more plants, maybe because it was sparse. But this, and it has this stake here. Does anyone have an idea? I know this one's really hard to identify, but
it looks like it's maybe the apricot mallow.
Yeah, I thought it was that, maybe the Lewis Hamilton one, because it's kind of a smaller one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I kind of had the same guess, and I can't really tell what this is, but anyone have a guess?
Which one? The one in the front on the...
It's like this purple,
back there.
Purple leaves in the background. It's very hard to tell, but
yeah, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest, but it looks like it might be Verbena lilacina,
yeah.
Which is, or maybe an Erigeron glauca, but it looks kind of tall. Either way, there's not that many purpley flowering types like that. So anyway, yeah, I do think the rain garden thing is a great thing to note. Obviously, the gutters are being routed to this area, so this gets quite a bit of water. So that would be something I just would keep in mind, that you want to make sure that this actually flows. When it fills, it actually does flow out to the street and not back to the house, which looks like it's doing. And you can see the yarrow in the front are all small. What else did I want to say about this or encourage you? Oh, does anyone have any thoughts about this stake that I mentioned?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of stakes or lodgepoles in general, just because they kind of hinder the plant from developing their own strength.
Yeah.
So that I would just say, remove that and prune it properly to allow it to be, more dense and just become stronger, so it can hold its own rather than have to rely on that stake.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel the same. Also, yeah, it's pretty leggy, so maybe that's what they're trying to kind of like corral here with this stake, or these two. But yeah, that's potential that you could just prune it shorter and like it will regrow. It's just about getting it's obviously a new plant because it wasn't here in this year or at installation. So I would, kind of take this almost like tip pinching, but, cut it a little bit harder back, just because it will come back. It's just, it's too leggy for the space. But also I was going to say, we talked about staking in the first year. And if a plant comes with the stake, you want to remove it. And if you are going to put in stakes, do the two side-by-side method way. And you want to make sure it's kind of loosely held on to the plant. Here's kind of like a interesting like hugging of it. But yeah, not my favorite staking method. And also, we really do want to encourage them to kind of grow in their own, strengthen on their own. So if there's something really leggy, I would potentially just use a stake maybe for a monkey flower like this, but very short, just to kind of hold maybe the early branches. But otherwise you'd want these either prune it or want to do the double stake thing. But this isn't a tree, so I wouldn't even put a stake in this. Like Elise said, I would probably just prune it.
I actually started to use like tomato cages, like the cone shaped ones, to help with plants that are just kind of flopping over, just so that they're full for a while. And then after a while, you can cut them back and kind of let them restart. Because when they're, like you said, when they're new, you want them to look like something. You don't want to just cut it back right away. But the tomato cages kind of give it structure, but you're not tying it to them. So it just kind of holds them.
And it like protects them from getting run over or whatever by people. And also like a nicely placed rock can kind of serve the same function. You know, it can kind of buttress some of the lower branches and then just kind of protect it from whatever, you know, traffic and whatnot. Here's another garden. Any thoughts on this? There's no right or wrong answers. Again, this is just kind of like a side assessment. Like, what would you say seeing this?
I like seeing gardens planted pretty sparsely, like she was saying before. It's kind of a breath of fresh air coming from commercial landscaping. Everything's so overplanted, and then you end up having to take things out and, you know, divide things so it doesn't look like much newly installed, but a year later, I mean, it's filled in, it's nice. The plants have room to continue to grow too. So
totally. Yeah, this is great. Like, it obviously at installation, and this would be something you might want to communicate to a new client, because in commercial landscaping, it doesn't look like this after install. It looks much more full usually after install, whereas with native plants, this is pretty standard. You know, it looks kind of sparse and it looks like a lot of mulch. So you really want to impress on your client that, like, yes, they will fill in. They just need time. You know, that kind of first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap. So in this one, obviously, you can see there's a lot of growth already. And yeah, there's plenty of space for these to grow out. And I mean, any just like thoughts as like a gardener, also, this one clearly to me is much more manicured. You know, it's much tidier of a look. I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just clearly there's this, these, oh my God, I'm forgetting the word for these pavers. They have a name, but anyway, these pavers are like, you know, corralling the space. There's a DG here, there's mulch. It's very, you know, manicured in a way. So that's definitely something that I would note and be like, okay, this is obviously important to the space. It's not like this rambling wildlife area, you know? Anyone want to take a gander at the plant IDs? Like this guy? Front?
is that Origeron, maybe Wayne Roderick?
Yes, yeah, that's definitely an Origeron glauca. Could be a Wayne Roderick. What about I mean, there's some flowers here and flowers here. Anyone want to take a guess?
The trees of Palo Verde.
Yeah, Parkinsonia.
Do they have it staked correctly?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I was just saying about the stakes, I'm not, these stakes that are really tight to the, that are really tight to the plant. I mean, usually the stake is like that from the nursery because they need it for the nursery setting like that, for moving them around and for them to not fall into their neighbors. But once we get it into the ground, especially a tree, like obviously they planted this and it was much larger than a 1 gallon. This is at least 5 or 15 gallon if it's this tall. And they just left the stake in there. But this is exactly at install. I would have put this at 2 stakes, you know, planting them out wider and then looping the landscaping tape around each side. So it has room to kind of like move. Here it's like strapped down, you know, and it's still strapped down a year later, which is bothersome for me. And so, yeah, this is not ideal with the staking for sure. And because it's not actually strengthening it. That's the whole thing. It's like Elise, I believe you mentioned the very first one, which is like, this isn't strengthening it. You want it to kind of, you know, get a little bit of sway in there so that the plant cells actually strengthen with a little bit of movement. It's just you want to have the stakes there to protect them in case there's any high wind or something like that, that it will help against that kind of situation. But it should be having some movement. You know, it's like a cast on your hand. You know, it's like you don't want to have a cast on the tree. You want it to have some movement.
And if you don't take it off, the tree will grow around either the ties or even sometimes into the lodgepole.
Oh, totally.
I see it like every week at least on job sites where there's a full like rubber tie.
Yep.
In the middle of the tree, and you're like, how did that get there? Well, it grew around it. So
yeah, you'll find some like weird bulge and you're like, what's that? And sure enough, it's like, yeah, some old
or I've seen where the lodgepole was removed like years later and there's a whole indent along the whole trunk of the tree, the shape of the lodgepole.
Yes, good point. So like this is only a year in, but most likely people forget, and then you just have this, and of course the tree will just keep growing around it, and then you kind of constrict and deform it. So not ideal staking. What about this site? So this is newly installed and left, and then it's only 4 months later here, which, what are you guys seeing here? Anything of note? There's no right answers. I want to make that clear. Just some things I noticed.
Kind of riparian, I guess.
Why is that?
Downhill, in a sense.
Yeah. So it's downhill. So that I like that you're thinking about that. Like you're thinking of the watershed, which is like the water flows this way, but the water flows this way, and then it hits the
the border, yeah.
Yeah, the barrier, which I feel like honestly is like a total missed opportunity, because it could have been a riparian zone, but now the water hits this and is going to just flow off. So we're actually losing all of this water that when it falls from the sky and hits this, could have been going into this planted area, which is great. Like you said, could have potentially been a riparian zone, or maybe just, a native plant zone, but it's just getting whatever extra from the top. But now it's not. So that bums me out as a missed opportunity. But I like that, yeah, you're noticing like this is the low point. So this is where water should flow, but unfortunately they've blocked it. So that's a bummer for me, but I'm kind of like really like catching all the water as much as possible. Anything else? Plant IDs, anything you like, don't like?
All the water is going to the water main.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can actually see some gullies too starting to form. So like the DG is just gonna wash away also, and probably fill this up, with just sand that you have to clean off all the time. In terms of plants, this looks like these are, so this is similar, it looks like a Butylon palmarii, which was mentioned earlier. And this actually also looks like gigantum in the back. The Eriogonum gigantum, the St. Catherine's lace. And then here, when I compare to these two, there's like, this is a Dudleya, that's the Dudleya. You can see it behind. I think you guys can see my mouse, right? I believe so. And there's a grass that's off screen here, but it's supposed to be somewhere over here. And then there's these two Verbena lilicinus. This is I mentioned that in the last slide, but they have this purpling flower. What about this spacing on this? Does anyone know how big these get?
Must mean they get big.
Like the verbenas get about 3 to 4 feet wide. 3 is pretty average. So, okay, but the Dudleya, and then I don't know what this one is behind. Like I can't tell, maybe it's a sage, but the Butylon palmarii also, 3 to 4 feet wide. This one definitely, that if that's an Eriogonum gigantum, definitely gets even 5 feet wide sometimes. So I'm concerned about this being poorly spaced. So maybe overplanted or just not spaced correctly. So you're going to have a lot of pruning to do as the time goes on. So maybe this is only 4 months in, but as these fill out even more, I think these are going to be just like a real mass of plants that doesn't look too hot if they're all like kind of together. Does anyone see what I'm talking about there? Or I know you guys, maybe all of you aren't familiar with how big the plants get, but also a grass, usually, unless it's like Malika imperfecta or something, or one of the stippas, the grasses can get quite large. And I'm guessing this is like a deer grass or something, because that's usually what people plant, and those get quite large. So I feel like the spacing is just not well thought of. This Dudley is very small. It should be like on the edge or something where it's not going to get smothered by these other plants. Also, Dudleyas, not sure if you remember from the plant ID class, they like a lot of drainage. They do not want to be in excessive water. And this, I would almost question the mulch type for this. This organic mulch is not what they're used to. And again, they like a real high draining zone. I would almost put the Dudleya over here with the rocks, because that's where it wants to be. And this just might not be the best combination of plants. Like the Verbena lilicina can take some extra water, but the Dudleya does not. So if you're keeping these two plants on the same watering schedule, you'll probably kill your Dudleya. If the Butylon palmarii is desert native, so it can hang with the Dudleya, but they can handle some extra water, but they do prefer desert kind of conditions. So this might not be the best mix of plants in terms of they don't have the same watering needs. So that's what I would note about that. Okay, this one you guys should all have comments about. This is like, there's some obvious things here.
Well, I'm noticing some moisture collection potentially, like a clayey or soil.
Like
It's
here.
hard to say.
Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
looks moist.
And then I'm noticing a manzanita planted there, which doesn't seem ideal.
I like where you're going.
I'm going to pause there.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to put the pressure on. Yeah, I'm definitely noticing there's a lot of moisture here, but then there's like dry mulch here. So something's up with the irrigation, either it's by hand or something's uneven at least, right? It seems as though this is higher than this point, but I can't be sure. But yeah, the irrigation situation, the watering is concerning because it's like, okay, there's some wetness. What about like there's mulch here and then there's none here? You know, obviously this is pretty thin mulch probably, or maybe enough, but this isn't. Like you want that even mulching all over. So that could be something additional, adding mulch here, fixing the wetness or whatever, figuring that out, I guess would be the best case scenario. What about like,
deadheading them?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of dead and dried seed heads up here. So yeah, and there's a lot of just dry material in general. This looks like it's a bunch of dried seed heads. I know it's not easy to see here too, but it looks like there's a lot of dry material that could be pruned back. So this is kind of due for a pruning, potentially like rejuvenation cuts, or, you know, it's just very like dense here. Like this could be multiple different types of plants. And so that also might've just been overplanted. It's very hard to see and say. Noe says also looks like they are overwatering. Yeah, I definitely would consider maybe some of this dead material is overwatered plants. You know, that would be investigating that further. And there's a lot of dryness and a lot of things to look at, to be concerned about, you know, because there's dryness, but a lot of wetness. So that would make me think it's being overwatered. Okay. I'll move on because I kind of wish the whole class was just that, like just looking at pictures and you guys giving me your 2 cents on it. But this again, so we did the checklist. We have the kind of site assessment, and how do we kind of make that a plan, you know, for you know, coming to an agreement with a client about what services we're going to provide. So you take that, and I'm going to go through all of these things. We have a slide for each of these, but essentially it's creating the map, identifying a problem if there is one. This is just a kind of loose end, talk to the owner about their priorities and going through that. So like I said, you want to create a map. I love doing that first thing. You want to walk the garden with the map so you can note all of the kind of important features and all of the things that we talked about. You want to be putting on your map. So anything that's like, if it's south facing, north facing, the high and low points for sure, where the water moves, like I was saying, what's it called? The watershed, and yeah, definitely where the property lines are, marking those. But yeah, just putting all that information from the checklist onto the map. And you could have done that as the checklist or separately, however you like to work. But next, you would identify the problems. So potentially, like you want to create a plan, an agreement, but you do want to make sure that you note all the problems first. You know, maybe it's one of like those first garden pictures we looked at. You know, it doesn't look like it has any major problems, and it's a healthy, you know, maybe it gets a healthy grade. So maybe there's no issues that you have to list as concerns, and it's just kind of a standard maintenance job. But you know, you want to note if there's any issues, because you might have to, you know, charge appropriately or add more hours to the maintenance because you have to deal with that problem. So you definitely want to identify any main problems, and that should be clear. Like something should jump out at you from your checklist or from your site assessment. There should be something that's kind of obvious, like, okay, it's the watering issue, or just like what you guys did on the pictures just then. So should be review, but any one of the problems are going to be one of the themes of each of the classes. You know, is it going to be a pest thing? Is it too many weeds? Is it a pruning issue? Is it a soil or issue. Are these the right plants for the right spot? Remember, that's a real issue, which is like just choosing or selecting the right plants for the site. And or is it something with irrigation, or is it multiple? But find out what your priorities are, find out what your main concern is, and of course ask the owner too what their main concern is, and talk with them about what that might be, and maybe giving them some idea of what you think the main problem is. Before I get any further, there's kind of no other place for this, but I would put this on your map or on your site assessment, just noting where is the point of connection for where does the irrigation system tap into the water supply. And usually, there's a water main, like that one photo, but then where is the irrigation connect to the main hose and stuff like that. So you want to know where the point of connection is. And I know any kind of water sources on my map, usually like any hose bibs and stuff. But for sure, you want to know where the shutoff valve is. If they have one, they should have one if it was installed properly. Because usually you have the water coming in from the main line, and then you have the irrigation connected and should have a shutoff valve, because otherwise, if something pipe breaks or something in your irrigation system, you have to shut off the water to the whole house. If there's not a shutoff valve, you'll have to shut off the water to the whole house to fix it. So definitely have that in place. Most gardens do, but if they don't, I would really press upon them to get that put in. And before you do any of that kind of irrigation work or any kind of planting of big trees, and I always do this before doing rain garden installs too, which is contacting Dig Alert. If you guys aren't familiar with 811 or Dig Alert, it's a free service. So basically you put in an order for a site, you give them the address, and you just put in the order and you show where you're going to be digging, and they will come out for free in within 72 hours and mark all of the utilities that are in that area where you're working. So it's always good to have, because sometimes the water's obvious usually because you have the water main, but not always. But also any other, if the electrical's underground, it's going to note, cable, internet cable, whatever, it's going to have all of that. So it's helpful to know those things, because you don't want to install a rain basin right on top, because you will be digging there. Or maybe not putting a really large tree with tree roots right on top of where pipes are going. So definitely just have that. That's just kind of random aside. But okay, so kind of getting back on task, which is so you had your, figuring out what the issue is, and then you want to kind of set your priorities with the owner. That's what I was kind of getting at before I went into Dig Alert, which is essentially you want to figure out what the issue is, and you guys kind of come to an agreement, of what is the priority here. And you should be able to explain to them what you see is going on and what you see as the issue, and you should have already heard or repeated back to them what you heard is their main issue, and also understanding how much they can actually afford and how much they're willing to put into their garden, how much they really want to spend here, so that you can actually give an accurate estimate and not waste anyone's time or money by giving them an estimate that they just never were going to pay for, or vice versa. So it's definitely this is set the priorities, what you're seeing going on, and including whatever they're seeing going on also. And that essentially, is basically it, but you definitely want to get this in writing. So whatever you came up with, whatever agreement you came up with or priorities you set, I like to send that in some kind of written form, kind of all this information, your site assessment, kind of summarize it in some way and present it to them in some kind of written form about what you've agreed that is the issues, what you're seeing are the issues. Maybe you can include your photos that you took, and maybe some formalized version of your site assessment, and just put it in writing so it's clear. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm saying I will do for your garden. This is the maintenance I will provide. And this is how much it is for the estimate. So definitely do that in writing. And once you're actually, and then they have an actual plan of what you're going to do. And over time, if you have multiple years with the same person, you definitely want to update that plan annually. So, keep it, you want to just kind of check in and communicate with them at least one time a year about how you see their garden going, and how you, just how you see the garden going. And of course, taking advantage of usually late summer to mention any kind of plant outs. that you want to do, because then you can take advantage of the rain coming and make your life easier. So that's kind of the checklist to final plan with the client. This slide just is basically like the top garden issues that landscape professionals in California say they have with native gardens. And yeah, the main one is, the only reason that we're showing this is just so that you guys get familiar with it, because this probably will be what you're dealing with, which is overplanting, definitely. And I know students past have said the same, which is dealing with a garden that's been overplanting. And then the second point is having to prune because of that overplanting, or whatever pests that come from that overplanting issue. Ants, definitely in the urban landscape, we see a lot of the Argentine ants. Gophers, as we talked about in the pest management class when I got carried away with gophers. Weeds as an issue, and then availability of plants in local nurseries. Definitely, like, I mean, luckily you guys have Theodore Payne as a resource in Los Angeles, but they don't have the same plants all year round. You know, it's not, it doesn't always have the, you know, just having knowing that like substitutes for the plants that you want to plant in, because sometimes they just don't carry them when you need them and when you want to plant them out. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 6:07. And we'll do a little cost analysis. I have a spreadsheet that I'll share, but let's come back at 6:07 and yeah, break. Okay, we're at 6:07. Right, so let's move to, okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of a, well, first, of course, I think this is kind of clear already, but you wanna be estimating from your checklist, you wanna be figuring out like how much time is this gonna take? So like really getting down to like how many hours is this gonna be, is gonna be needed for these maintenance visits on this site. And I think I've mentioned this before. This is on page, what is it? Page 139 of your workbook. This isn't my favorite calendar, but I mean, it doesn't have all the specifics, but it's a good kind of starting place, I think. In fact, I know one student in a different cohort actually like took this and added to it and like kept going with this. There's 2 pages of it. But the idea here is like basically mapping out and estimating per month how many hours for each activity. So this just is like a good starting place. You can also just use your checklist, but if you really don't know where to start, this kind of is a good starting point. Not all of these things, I think, as we did in one of the homework assignments was to kind of find some discrepancies in this calendar. So there are some discrepancies here, but you can potentially use this to kind of customize for each garden that you're maintaining, and like kind of nail down how many hours you will need for each for the garden. So I have to escape here. We're going to do a little cost analysis work plan thing. It's very simple. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. Let me make sure. Is this visible? I'll zoom in because last time it seemed like it was kind of hard to see. Can you guys see these numbers and things?
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay, great. So here I've got this pricing worksheet and I've got a bunch of tabs. I've got to toggle between a couple of them. So if you ever lost, the one with the green font is where I'm at. And so first we'll just kind of start with, so we have a tab for a turf garden and for a native garden. This is, again, well, before I get into all the numbers, this is really just talking about the labor and the hours. This isn't going to include materials really and whatever markup you have or your overhead. This is really just kind of getting down to, okay, if I can estimate how many hours I need to spend in this garden, multiply that by your whatever rate your laborer has, then I can figure out what the maintenance cost will be for the year. And then kind of sticking in that category. So I don't want you to get too stuck on the numbers because of course there's a lot of variability in what people charge. You know, there's the lower to higher, you know, lower and higher end. So it's not so much about the numbers, but more about like how to think about it. So here is just to compare like a turf garden and a native garden, potentially with maintenance costs, which again, just based off of the hours of time you'll spend. So just to kind of explain this here, we have this kind of pretend maintenance bid, and you can see the project here. Or sorry, this is the different areas of the garden. So this is like the front yard, backyard. Here's the square footage. So 1,200 for the front, 1,300 for the back, which is a total of 2,500 square feet for the whole project. And again, this is for turf garden. So you can see it's turf and bedding plants. That's all kind of itemized. And here we have hours per month. So these are what we're estimating as the hours that are needed per month for this site. And that's going to depend on how many visits you make. So here you can see this client we're going to be visiting every week. And that makes sense for a turf garden. You do go more frequently and you usually spend less time there because it's like, you know, just blow and mow style. So it's a much faster but more frequent job. And we'll compare that with the native garden. But if we, you know, standard, you're visiting weekly with a turf yard. So when we say hours per month, we mean 4 times, well, let's say there's only 4 weeks instead of 4.2, just for math's sakes. There's 4 weeks in a month. So that means 4 hours per month on just this 1,000 square feet of turf means that it's an hour per visit, right? Because the visits are every week. So, so for the month, you're going to spend a full 4 hours. And that's itemizing each of these down to each zone, right? So you get a full 16 hours per month, which would mean per visit, it's 4 hours per visit, right? Because you're only going weekly. This is for the whole month. And if there's 4 weeks in a month, divide 16 divided by 4, the 4 hours per visit. So we get the 16 hours, and then you just take that 16 hours and multiply it by, here you can see there's, this is the rate for the maintenance worker. There's other rates too you could add in if you wanted, but here we're just using 40. Of course, could be lower or higher if you're having someone else go out. But just for the sake of this exercise, we basically have the 16 hours. You can see this is the formula. It's the hours times the rate of the employee, which comes out to $640. So that's the cost per month just for this to pay for this employee to do this, or potentially not employee, maybe you're pocketing it. So that's the $640 per month. And then you can figure out what's the cost per visit, which would just be the cost per month divided by how many visits you do. So again, it's weekly visits. So $640 divided by 4, which you can see again, the formula here. $640 divided by 4 gives you $160 per visit. So that's what you're pocketing. That's what you're paying. Depends on your business model. But $160 per visit is what you're getting based off of this situation. And you can also calculate the annual cost, which would just be the monthly times 12. Of course, you can see the formula here. And that's, that could be potentially your bid. This is what you can estimate as how much you'll spend or how much you would charge. And then this is nice, I think. You don't necessarily have to give this to the client or anything, but having the annual cost per square foot, which is this divided by the square footage. So this is just like a nice kind of like back of the napkin calculation, and getting an idea for how much you charge. Some people it's $3, some people it's $5, some people it's $35. So figuring out what yours is will be helpful in the future if you're on a site and just have to make a quick kind of guesstimate for a site, about a maintenance bid. And it would be like, okay, $3 times whatever the square footage is. And that kind of gives you an idea, ballpark of what you normally charge. Anyway, so this is turf. I would say focus on this part, which is the cost per visit is $160. Now with a native garden, it's the same kind of situation. We still have the $40 an hour maintenance worker. I haven't changed anything except for the hours per month, which actually are the same hours, but when you see the details, they're visiting only twice a month, which makes sense with what we've talked about. In the first year, you might be visiting twice a month. For a native garden, maybe less as the garden matures. But yeah, it makes sense to be visiting twice a month, and you're probably spending more time there. So the square footage has gone down a bit. I'll show you the other one. The 2,500, now it's 200 square feet less, because there was basically like the turf is all turned into native plants, but we missed some kind of bedding plants that got removed. I think it was like a transition basically from a conventional garden to a native garden. So square footage has gone down by about 200 square feet, which isn't much, but the hours now are the same. It's still 16 hours for the whole month, but now you're only coming twice a month. So it's basically 8 hours per visit is what we're saying. So like a full 8-hour day per visit. And then if it's the same hours, same cost for the employee, it's the same cost per month. But now this is when it's different, which is the cost per visit goes up. So you pocket more per visit potentially, or you pay more per visit, however you want to see it. And this is definitely dependent on however much you pay your maintenance worker, if it's you or someone else. So this might be, maybe it's higher for a maintenance worker for native plant gardens and lower for a, kind of a standard conventional commercial turf garden. So the annual cost would be the same. And you can see this actually goes up a little bit, and that's just because the square footage has gone down. So we're dividing it by a smaller number. So it just goes up a bit. But yeah, just kind of keeping in mind that this is just kind of a way to think about it. So this column here, though, hours per month, this is where you have to kind of input this, like how much time are you going to spend? And that's where the checklist will help. And then figuring out all the different tasks. So using that calendar to figure out like, okay, how much am I really going to spend on this garden? And that's going to depend on, of course, how difficult, how many problems does it have? How big is it? Also, how many plants need pruning or not pruning, that's all going to come from your checklist. And here is a task timings kind of table. Oh, that's really hard to say, task timings table. And I think this is just from the first one, which is, it's by year, because as we've talked, your tasks will change over the years. Usually in the first year, you're doing much more weeding, a lot more watering. And then in the later years, when the plants are mature, you're probably doing less of those tasks and more pruning, maybe more formal pruning, very much depends. But what you can do is actually kind of create one of these tables to like help you get that monthly, the hours per month, by literally divvying up the tasks by everything you need to do. So you can use that calendar to give you an idea of what tasks need to be done, or you just know from experience. But here's just an example, which is like literally things like weed per 100 square feet. And then it's easy for you to figure out like, okay, if it's this many square feet, if it's 500 square feet and it takes me 25 minutes to do 100, no, not 25 minutes, sorry, timeout. These are in hours, the values. So that's like a quarter of an hour, which is 15 minutes. So if it takes me, 15 minutes to do 100 square feet and I have 200 square feet, it's 30 minutes. So you just kind of customize it to your site. And you will always add things that are like sweep and clean up or irrigation check, because that's pretty standard. You do that every time almost, or maybe you do your irrigation check, 4 times a year, but kind of getting a rough ballpark of the different main activities you'll be doing. And then you can sum them up. So you can be like, okay, this garden's going to be a 2.5 hour visit, probably more because there's really nothing filled out here. But mulch application, tip pinching for new plants, 100 square feet, which here it's 0.1 hour, which is like 6 minutes, so if you're tip pinching 100 plants, or 10 plants, that's going to be a full hour. So it's just kind of starting to think about your garden in tasks and how much time it takes. And this time isn't like the standard, you shouldn't, you don't have to like time yourself or like, you don't have to hold yourself to the standard. Maybe your crew is faster or you're faster or slower, but getting a ballpark range of how long it takes you to do certain activities so that you can really kind of formalize and calculate how many hours you're going to spend on a site. Of course, these change, you're not necessarily doing the same activities each visit, but you can get a ballpark range. And I really like, especially on installs, having a time for how long it takes to plant a 1 gallon, like dig the hole, fill the hole with water, plant the plant, and then water it in. I like to have a good estimate on that, because if you're planting out 100 plants and you've calculated one plant is 0.25, then that means that's 5 hours of work to plant that out. So you got to bring more guys or whatever it is. So yeah, just certain of these can be really helpful for giving an estimate. And I think it's just a good way to think about your garden if you're like, how do I make an estimate if you're in that space? What else did I have? Yeah, basically, so this is going to give you the full hours, and this will help you give a value for this hours per month zone, right? Because you'll know how many hours you're spending each visit, and then you just multiply it by however many visits you're doing. And so that really kind of streamlines the estimate part. Lastly, I think, what do I have here? 9-inch. Oh, this is just a sample kind of landscape contract for a turf proposal. But I wanted to just show it because I think it's important to kind of provide a similar thing for native plants, because you can see it has all of the different activities and maintenance that will be provided within the contract or within the bid. And you can see like there's aeration for turf, because you do need to do that for turf, especially big ones, or like big, commercial properties. And there's fertilization, which makes sense for turf programs. There's a lot of it, 6 times a year. It's included. All of these things are kind of listed and itemized. And you want to kind of provide the same thing for your native plant proposals, so that people actually understand what maintenance is for native plants, because a lot of times there is this misconception that like native plants are low maintenance or no maintenance, but they're not no maintenance. They're just low maintenance. So you potentially wouldn't have all this fertilization stuff. This might be like pruning, might be pruning the mature plants or deadheading. Your activities would change on your native plant contract. But I think it's important to just kind of try to create something similar for a native plant garden, so that you're actually, you're meeting expectations, you're telling them what to expect and all of those things. Oh, I'm a little behind on time. That's good. These slides are kind of like not as interesting, I think. So this is like just all, again, this should all be kind of review, which is just troubleshooting. If you are doing maintenance in a garden and you come across some problem that you have never had before, you want to have some kind of plan so that you actually start to learn how to fix these problems. Because if you just kind of throw everything at it and it resolves itself, you don't really know what fixed it. So you do want to kind of be methodical when it's a new problem you've never had. So this is such a generic kind of troubleshooting steps that it kind of goes for everything in life, but like understand the problem, make a plan, execute the plan, and then see if the problem has gotten resolved. So with understanding the problem, again, this is where all your resources will be really your friend here, which is like, CalScape, the student handbook, that maintenance data sheet that is in the handbook, UCIPM's website, all the different resources we've talked about is where you are going to start to do your investigating. And of course, this is if you're, well, anyway, I'll just keep going. So you want to be investigating and figuring out if this is like a native plant problem that you are just not familiar with, or is it just, something you have had experience with. But really, like I guess what I'm saying is, like this question here that says, does it require a different approach with native plants? Is it, for example, like summer deciduous plants? That's not something you see in commercial landscapes usually. There's not summer deciduous plants usually. It's just they're the same all year long. So is it something that's unique to native plants? Does it require a different approach? So is it summer deciduous? Is it like a manzanita that has dieback, which isn't a common occurrence with other plants? This is something that's more to Arctostaphylos. So understand the problem, get to know, ask more questions. I would say the main thing I would investigate, usually like put at the front of my mind when there's an issue, is always ruling out like a water issue or an irrigation issue, because that's so commonly the problem with native plants, is like not watering them appropriately, or something happening with the watering, like the controller broke and now it's just on the like autopilot default mode, and that's like watering too much, something like that. So I would always say, like, if you're having a problem, just first rule out that it's not an irrigation thing, because that typically is the issue. And then also that replanting thing we've talked about. If you have to replant, you got to remember to put it on a different watering schedule, because so often people just put it on the same schedule as their mature garden and they just don't make it, or they put the whole garden on the new plant schedule, and then you kind of risk your mature garden's lifespan. So yeah, understand the problem. Then you get into making your plan. You should have, made a list or something. You have consulted the UCIPM website or UCNR IPM website, and you should have some kind of list of solutions and be able to rule some out maybe, or just choosing the least toxic solution that's offered by IPM. They list all the different solutions for pest stuff, and just pick a plan, and also I think this is an important time to start like honing and making connections. So if you're seeing, like, looking for patterns that you see in different gardens, so if you see the same plant with the same issue, start to like note that and catalog that in your own brain, because that's going to just get you more experience understanding them and starting to note and look for patterns. And that could be like spatially or patterns temporally, like this is always the same issue. I see it always this time of year, or I always see this with plants in the shade, or whatever. And then you just kind of basically, pick one of your plans and stick with it. You want to do your plan, execute your plan. This might require a visit to the site, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just like, we're going to leave it, because a lot of times that's what IPM website suggests. But work your plan, do whatever it is you're supposed to do. And again, if there is a way to prioritize it, I would say address your irrigation issue first, whatever it might be. If you have multiple issues, address the irrigation one first. That's always the priority in terms of whatever plan needs to be done. and then deal with whatever pest or disease issue, because irrigation first, then pest, and then replant stuff. So if you're having plant loss, you don't want to replant the plants and then deal with the pest issue or whatever. You want to always deal with the irrigation issue first, and then the pest, and then do replanting. So that should be kind of the order of your plan executions. And then just, is the problem solved? Is it solved in the time that you had planned for? These are, especially with IPM stuff, the issues are not going to resolve overnight. You want to give a nice, generous time frame. And also remember this idea of threshold, like how, maybe you want to give a nice, generous threshold in mind, have a nice, generous threshold in mind when solving a problem and deciding if it is solved. So, okay, we're at 6. Okay, cool. These are some just kind of loose end slides. And then we'll kind of wrap up. So inventory is really helpful to have. Having an inventory of your plants. So not only for like the client's education. So a lot of times, they might be trying to learn their plants and want to know what they have in their garden. Clearly, that's always good to have for them. But also for yourself, it's always good for your own education. I mean, not just on plant identification, but like I was saying, like learning about how the same plant works in different sites, and learning which ones work best. But also just so you can have an idea of like which plants you want to repeat, which ones are easiest for you or work well in the garden. So having a good inventory is really helpful, or some kind of record of what plants are where. And especially because there's so many different cultivars within the native plants. So for example, there's common yarrow, which is the Achillea millefolium. And there's like, I want to say there's like hundreds of cultivars. They're all common yarrow, but they have all these different colors like island pink, paprika, and California white, and all sorts of different colors. So if you don't have somewhere written down like this house has paprika, then if you want to replace it, it's really hard to remember. And if you know what I mean, it's like unless you're familiar. So having some kind of inventory of the plants, and especially the cultivars, because sometimes it's not that easy to know the cultivar once it's in the ground, if you're not familiar with the plants themselves. So here's just like a kind of plant information record type thing. I believe this is like Microsoft Access, which I don't use, so I can't really answer a lot of your questions about it. But I just use like an Excel spreadsheet, and just enter it in, that sort of thing. This is actually just plant information if that's what you need, if you're not familiar with the plant, which, this one has just like, it's a native, it's in full sun, it's, common to the low mountains, foothills, blah, 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 all of the kind of information about the plant. But then I think the more helpful thing is kind of like your inventory record of the specific plant in your garden. And like I said, I just do an Excel spreadsheet, but this is has a picture of the actual plant and a picture of what it's supposed to look like. And then the botanical name, common name, some notes. Really helpful is when it was acquired. So when it went in the ground, the source, so they bought this at Las Politas, they have the price, how many, there's some like a multitude of things you could put on here. But I think this is helpful because, for example, here's a note that says 2018, very scraggly looking. It sends up shoots, but it's so messy and grim looking, has never flowered. So if I look at that it says in 2018, and it was planted sometime in 2013, that's 5 years. That's well beyond the time of establishment. So the plant should be established at this point, and it's still grim looking and never flowered. Like that's going to help me decide, oh, okay, this has got to move, or I have to plant something else here. And so that's another reason inventory and keeping records is helpful. You can just really follow up with gardens on and how plants are doing, because somebody who's not trained might just think, oh, this plant only has a couple of years, maybe I'll just prune it, and needs help that way. So inventory is important to kind of pick out the winners and non-winners, I suppose. There's also just like the metrics for like I think this is more for installation. So we talked about this with some of the photos, which is if you at an install, typically the garden is pretty bare looking. And I think because we're so accustomed to commercial landscapes where they pop in everything and it's basically full size or at full color or whatever, right when it's planted, that people have this expectation with landscaping. So with native plants, it usually doesn't look like that. As we saw, it's pretty bare looking, or it looks like a lot of mulch or really tiny plants. So you kind of have to educate the client about what to expect, about what is actually considered a successful, functioning, living, doing its thing garden, especially from install. I don't think this is like maintenance really related, but you can kind of educate them about what those metrics or those signs of success would be. It could be like, you're going to see a lot more wildlife. That is a sign that your garden is alive and working. More pollinators, more hummingbirds, all the things, especially things like maybe seeing some new growth in some of the plants, like within 6 months. So giving them a time frame, like, or even explaining that sleep, creep, leap concept. So they can be like, okay, so I might not see a lot of growth in the first year, but maybe a little bit within 6 months. And also kind of giving them an idea of how many plants will survive. There's always going to be loss. And, I usually, expect about 5 to 10% plant loss after an install. So they can have an idea, if there's more than that, they're like, oh, whoa, something's up. Or if there's, they can just giving them some metrics to kind of decide that the garden is successful, because it's not always obvious, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not obvious to folks that don't have familiarity with native gardens. And then that brings me to basically managing expectations. Same thing, which is, I guess I never put that on slideshow. Whatever, it's all the same. Basically, yeah, managing expectations with your clients is all about the communication. I think at any point there's whatever opportunity you can take to remind them of specific things and expectations. I think that's important. Do it in your writing, in whatever, plan, text message, when you're verbally talking to them. One time is not enough a lot of the time, because like I said, people that are new to native gardens are really having the idea of commercial gardens in their mind. So you want to make sure that you are educating them appropriately so that they have the right expectations. Because I know early on for me, I understood it, but I didn't express that to the client. And there was like a lot of disappointment, like, oh, I just thought it would be much more green, or I thought it would be more plants. And them being disappointed, even though within a year they were super excited because it's all filled out, but them not understanding that upon install. So that was definitely my fault for not expressing, hey, there's going to be like a good year period or 6 month period where it looks kind of bare and it's just a mulch garden. So I would definitely mention that. So time it takes for plants to reach maturity. That's definitely something you want to, that sleep, leap, creep thing, or sleep, creep, leap. I definitely want to like impress that on them, that they're not mature once you put them in the ground. And because of that, their watering needs are particular in that establishing time frame. So that 1 to 3 years is considered establishing. So you're going to like be watering a little more frequently and slowly tapering it off. So that's important too, because if they're expecting water savings, they're not going to get them in that first year. So you want to be like making sure you tell them that. And or even the concept of summer dormancy. Sometimes we put plants in that we know will be great, but the client might not be expecting summer dormancy, or not know like, why is my plant all dried out? What's this about? So explaining to them that these plants are summer dormant, and this is kind of just a natural feature that they have, or we can water it more, and maybe that helps, or maybe it doesn't, depends on the plant variety. And then lastly, just that thing that low maintenance doesn't mean no maintenance. So again, so many people think that native gardens are like, oh, well, there's no maintenance to them, but that's clearly not the case. Otherwise we wouldn't have had so many classes. But yeah, there is definitely maintenance involved. So you want to make sure that they understand that. Because I've definitely had that too, where someone just wants the garden installed and they're like, great, the plants are in, so I don't have to worry about this anymore. And then sure enough, 3 years later, it's like unruly and crazy because nobody's tending to it. So there is ways to design gardens to be more low maintenance and choose select plants that are lower maintenance. But again, it's always just low maintenance. It's not no maintenance. And that is kind of the thing, like turf gardens need weekly visits, and these are going to need monthly visits at a certain point or less, Okay. Okay, I think this is the last kind of slide before we talk about, yeah, so this is just like wrapping it up. You guys should continue to educate yourselves and Theodore Payne Foundation clearly has a bunch of classes, tours, all sorts of things. And any of your local CNPS chapters, so California Native Plant Society, also usually have meetings or seminars or classes, plant sales. There's so many opportunities to learn more about native plants, and you can invite your clients too, because a lot of times people like get all into it, after they just have a garden. So you can participate in those things or invite your clients too. But definitely, I know the CNPS chapters, they love when a maintenance worker comes and shows up and like just talks about their experience of maintaining native plants and things that they've seen work and not work. So that's a great opportunity for anyone who's interested to getting more involved with like the Native Plant Society or just the native plant community. I guess it's not just about California Native Plant Society, but also, potentially really good for business, not to be all like grubby about it. But yeah, I definitely think that's a way to get more involved and, that sort of thing. Oops, I think I skipped some. Yes, I did. I'm already done. Last, just the certificate. This is a review of the first class, which is how you can use it. And you'll get like a digital kind of logo, but you'll also get your actual certificate and a bunch of vehicle logos, or just logos, I guess you can put them on anything. And you can use those on any of your social media profiles, your business card. You can use it wherever, honestly. The way you want to advertise yourself with those, the way you want to advertise yourself with the logo or whatnot, you can, there's a million ways. You get 5 decals, and I think you get a digital logo and like the actual certificate. So with employers though, so if you are an employer, the program currently is not offered to like entities or businesses. So the business can't say that it is certified native plant landscaping, whatever, by Theodore Payne, just individuals. But employers can advertise, obviously, that they have certified workers, that we just can't actually certify businesses or anything like that at this point. So I think that's my last slide. Yeah, okay, this is good because we have time. First of all, congratulations. You guys are done. And we really appreciate you guys participating, because I was just talking about this with Lydia earlier. I'm not sure if this is a pilot program still or not, but it has been in the works, and I do know they want to expand it. And the surveys really help. So I am going to actually put the survey in the chat, and maybe you guys can just do it right now since we have time. I think it only takes 15 minutes. So let me do that. So this is the survey for the class. And as I was saying, it's super helpful for us because that's how we kind of improve the program. And they really do want to expand the program. So all of your guys' comments really do help. So please, share. And don't worry, it's totally anonymous. I don't hear anything bad or good, really. I mean, I definitely hear the comments, but I don't hear who it's from. So feel free to be totally honest. And please take the survey right now since we have time and I have you, and who wants to do it later. And while you're doing that, if anyone has any questions or last comments, or just, wants to hoo-ha about excitement of finishing, it's open for you guys. Oh, thank you, Andrea, for your kind words. And I'm glad that you're able to use all the resources. That's awesome. Are you guys doing the survey or like? Oh, I like this. You guys are so shy tonight.
Yes, I am doing the survey.
Okay, good. I just want to hear something. I just hear silence and black screens, so it's good to get nice. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we have to minimize the survey to talk, so.
Right.
I'm glad you got the survey, because at first Brendan asked me, you're going to send me the survey, and I was like, where's the survey? I don't see it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
yeah, I got the email.
You had it. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's the pruning workshop tomorrow. For any of you guys, you probably can still sign up, but there you should be receiving your certificate if you're going. Otherwise, you can pick it up, and I believe they mail them out to at a later date. But yeah, you should definitely do the pruning workshop if you can. I'm not sure who's teaching it. It's not me, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless anyone needs that. Oh yeah, I have the survey link, so yeah. I mean, I can also, if no one has any questions, we can wrap this up and you guys can just finish your survey after, but.
I have a really quick question, Claire. When you were doing that spreadsheet on Excel for the budgeting and the hourly how we spent, is that something you came up with, or is it available somewhere? I didn't catch that.
It's not in your. It's not a resource you guys have access to, but I didn't develop it. Actually, came from Theodore Payne. And but I believe I can send it to you guys. In fact, I'll send it to Brenda to send it with the last.
Great. Yeah, because I think you said it was a template on micro. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's basically like a lot of them are just sample kind of what's it called, pricing kind of worksheets.
Got it.
So yeah, I'll send it to Brenda. I can just email her right now.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Send that out with the last kind of recording.
Thanks.
Yeah, good reminder. Thank you.
I finished my survey.
Perfect. Yeah, you just submit it and goes into the ether. No, somebody reviews it, tells me about it later.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask, because some of the recordings for the past, I missed one class, and the recordings for the past class hasn't been updated.
Oh, on the very recent one, or on?
Right, I noticed that too.
I missed I think the class from 1 or 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to catch up. I had time to catch up before the next class, but we never got the recording.
Okay.
Yeah. We're a little behind, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I don't actually do that editing of the videos. So so it's just, you'll probably get them after the certificate. So yeah, sorry about that, because then you guys could have caught up probably on the Thanksgiving break or whatever. But yeah, you will get them eventually. So also with all the, like I said, when Brenda sends out, she'll probably send out an email of any final kind of things. And I'll have her send that pricing worksheet, but I'll mention that to her too, that folks don't have all of their videos yet.
I saw somewhere that something about renewing.
Currently, there isn't any program to have to renew your certification. Mm-hmm. It was a consideration early on before we started the program, that there would be kind of credits you'd have to do to keep your certification up to date. But I believe LADWP didn't, because they're one of the partners, they didn't want to have that as part of the program, so it got removed. So maybe you saw an old, but it's not currently it's not set up that way, so you don't have to do any renewing. But that was something that I know was early on in the program. That would be really cool, actually. I kind of want it to be even more. Of course I do. But yeah, I think that would be cool to offer kind of continuing classes, or just anything, maybe it's just classes at Theodore Payne that they offer, but I think that would be a really cool part of it. And hopefully in the future it gets to be like that. Because like I said, it's still very much a pilot program, I think.
If Brenda ever decides to go ahead and do the name for plants class, that would be great. The plantas para idiotas, I think it's what she called it.
Yeah, plantas para pendejos.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I've definitely sat in on her classes. They're great. She does know so much about like the word origins and name origins. So I definitely recommend them. And I do know it comes up every, I don't know, couple months with Theodore Payne, so you just kind of have to stay on top of their calendar a bit. But it's a good one.
Yeah, those sound interesting. Sounds very helpful too.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's just like when you're starting from zero, it's like, what is all this? It's just
right. The complicated names. I know it's families, but what goes with what? It's overwhelming right now, but I'm sure I'll get there.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the flashcards are kind of helpful. And for myself, like I'm just a total dork, and I would use them literally like flashcards and have them like, this is the card, and I would just cover the name and just kind of go through them like flashcards, trying to remember them.
Gotcha.
So that was literally how I learned. I didn't have these flashcards, but I had something similar. And also, if you do walk out in nature or even just in gardens, you see native plants, like just starting to hone, like, okay, I think it's this, and figuring out. Yeah, it is hard, but it does get easier. It really does.
Yeah, all of a sudden, everything starts popping up. You're walking somewhere, going, "Oh, I know that one. Oh, I know that one."
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true, and especially in the like landscaped world of native plants, there's pretty much the same. There's a lot of the same plants, so it's not like when you go out into the wild nature where there's like more variety and you're like, what is this even? They look totally different. I think that's what's kind of nice about the landscaped native plants, is it's sometimes a bit easier to kind of figure them out. But I really recommend you guys using your flashcards, because they have some really, they're already in that format for like, kind of sifting through.
Thanks.
Also, like, I know, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought.
I was in Yosemite 2 weeks ago, and I was like, that's a manzanita right there.
Nice. Yeah. I know there's plants that, like, because I walk, I do like hikes a lot, and there's plants that I'm still learning. I'm like, oh my God, I know what that is now. Like, I just learned that plant, and I'll like, I've seen it many times, but just never connected it, So yeah, it's really, I still get like really excited when I like get the name right on a plant I'm not familiar with. It's a little bit easier with landscape plants because they're a lot of the same ones.
Are you ever around people who just don't know anything, and they're like, you just get excited, and then they're like, what the heck is wrong with that
all the time. That's like my life,
Yeah.
But also that makes it so exciting when you meet people that are like plant people, because you're like, oh my God, I saw a poverty weed. I have a hyacinth. You get all dorky. It's ridiculous. Also, like, I know I work a lot in Mexico, and they have different common names, but of course the same Latin names. But even the pronunciation of the scientific names or the Latin names is kind of more like they pronounce it like you would speak Spanish. So I'll get those mixed up, where if I'm like the American accent of like the scientific name is different than the Spanish one. So like, I think, and I always mess that up. Brenda, I think, corrected me, because like there was the toyon, which is in English we say Heteromeles arbudifolia, but in Spanish they say Heteromeles arbudifolia. And so it's like, and I'd be like, and then I would mix them, and I'd be like hetero Heteromeles. Like I never get them right. So
That's so funny.
we're all still wrong all the, or I feel like I'm always wrong, but.
You know, I heard that toyon is like the one of the few native plants that is actually still has its indigenous
Yeah, the common name.
Common name.
The toyon, yeah, that's what they
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
I don't know if it's like the only one from SoCal.
This is like truly a question for Brenda. I think it is the only one that's common name is still, referred to it. But also it has other common names like Christmas berry and other things
Oh
too.
yeah, that's right.
So that is the issue with common names is there's just so many, even for the same plant. But yeah, that is kind of cool about the toyon. But there's also, I know he goes by Native Hummingbird on Instagram and his name's Nick. I can't remember his last name, but he's an indigenous person who like he'll make like posts about the indigenous names of the plants and then usually have the scientific names so you can learn the names of the plants, the indigenous names. But of course that is also local, depends on what region. So the Kuya have a different name for it than the like Chumash or something like that. So common names have always been like that, very regional. Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw a direct message. Okay. Someone is saying that they signed up for the 8:30 a.m. Pruning class, but they can't sign in. It might be full. Honestly, I don't actually manage the Eventbrite. I don't want to recommend to just show up in case you can't, but I tend to find, this is a pretty small class. So I feel like your bet is pretty good. And if you have a good time window and you can't make it, the next class is at 10:30. So I don't know if you want to risk it, but I think it's a pretty good risk. Like it's a good probability you'll get into the class, I would say. But I really don't manage it, so I don't know. And I don't want to, you could try to text Brenda, but I know or email Brenda, but it's pretty late.
Yeah,
I was talking to Brenda last week about it, and she said that the 8 a.m. was a little bit full.
Okay.
That better chances was the 10.
Yeah,
that makes
class.
Sense.
Thank
so
you.
That might be it, that it's not allowing you to sign in. It might be, like Claire said, it might be full, but I mean, that was last week. I don't know what the deal is for.
Yeah, I would trust that. That sounds pretty accurate. And they do, it probably did fill up, and then the 10:31. Hopefully you can make the 10:31 or the 10. Sorry, I keep saying 10:30. 10.
How many people did they want to have for each class? Do you know?
Well, I think the top in the past, the max was 10 people per class, but
10.
we only have
like
17, I think, in this class total. Mm-hmm. So it must have filled up the first one, and the second one will probably be sort of empty-ish. Which
I'm quite surprised that it filled, because I chose that one because I thought people were going to come to this.
I know. I kind of surprised too, because I'm like 8:30.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's a Saturday, guys.
I know you're getting up early to try and get there and everything.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's super early.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like really applaud your guys' morning power, That's good. I feel like my brain is like, it's Saturday. So yeah, maybe Joe, it's a better idea to do the 10 o'clock one. I don't want to lead you astray, if you can make it.
Yeah, I'll try to make it. I'm local anyhow, so.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Yeah.
I'll try both.
Yeah. Also, I know one year there was only one person in the second class, like the 10 a.m. or whatever, and they were short a teacher, and this person got a personal class with Tim Becker. Nice. And I was like, that is awesome. Tim Becker is the director of horticulture at Theodore Payne. So I was like, it might be like, a great opportunity to just like ask all your questions. He's just like a wealth of knowledge, and he just showed up and taught the class. And it turned out there was only like one person that showed up, and I was like, wow, what an opportunity that person got. That's great.
So I missed this. Did you say that they're going to mail us our certificates or
Usually you pick it up at the class, like they'll have it at the class if you go to that pruning workshop. And then Brenda will probably send out an email offering you guys to come pick it up. And then they do eventually mail it out if you can't come pick it up, but it's later.
Should we bring our tools for tomorrow?
Yeah, you can bring your pruners if you have some, but that's probably all you need to bring. You probably don't need to bring loppers and the whole thing. They'll probably just have you pruning, hand pruning with hand pruners.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we should bring our own just because of, diseases that might be on that they didn't want in the garden.
They'll probably have something to clean them with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Eric last time he taught it last cohort, and he said that people could bring their pruners, but they also have plenty of extras. So if you don't have any or you don't want to bring yours, they have them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any last things, guys? We've only 3 minutes left. So anything else?
Thank you.
Do you have any particular brands of pruners or any of the other tools that you like?
Yeah, I really like ARS. ARS is, I think it's a Japanese brand. And I don't know what it stands for. It's just ARS. They're great pruners that, the joke actually that my mentor says is that ARS stands for always really sharp, but they are really great, high quality Japanese tool. They're a little pricier than whatever you buy at Target, but great. And they're loppers. They have loppers. They have all the kind of tools. And that, what is it called? Down in Little Tokyo, they have a little kind of hardware gardening store. They have ARS tools there. So definitely a local spot you can pick up, but a lot of nurseries have them too. But that's definitely my fave. I think next I would say Felco's. I like Felco's are pretty good, but the ARS are even better.
Well, Claire, what's your background? Are you a landscaper by trade?
Yeah, kind of. Well, I started off as a vegetable culinary manager, and then now, I do more garden installs. And I did maintenance for a while, but I'll do it on off chance. But really, it's more of installs with native gardens. And my main focus is doing the rainwater capturing gardens. So it's kind of wildscapes. So yeah, it's mostly installs and trying to capture water in the on-site with utilizing the native plants.
You work for yourself or you work for a company?
No, yeah, sorry, I work for myself. Yeah. So I do that down here in Mexico. I'm in Baja right now. And sometimes I'll do consulting or help install a native garden. And then I'll do the same in SoCal. So I do it in LA and San Diego. So yeah, basically just I work for myself.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are you going to teach any more classes?
Not right now. I don't have anything on the docket. Sometimes down here in Baja, I'll teach I'll do a native plant walk, to identify native plants for beginners and stuff. But I don't have anything on basically December is just shot. I have a bunch of designs and things I'm supposed to do. I'm not really a designer, but people ask me to do them. And so, you do what they ask. So I have a bunch of.
Do you use a computer program for that, or you just sketch it out? Or
I want to. That's the next step. I think is I'm like I said, I'm not a designer by trade, and so I don't have that background. And so I actually just have always just drawn them out, or do kind of a micro design where you just bring the plants on site and lay them out. Depends on what they want, because obviously if they want a whole design. But usually that's with clients I already know, and they just want more native plants in their landscape, so I can just lay them out. If I draw it, I just literally have to draw it by hand. But yeah, that's my next thing where I'm I think I need to take classes on this, because I just get asked to do it more often than I thought I would.
I would just like to say thank you, Claire, for the class. I know it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. I think I had it was really cool because I actually took the G3 water, what is it called? That's a stormwater capturing class too, a couple years ago.
Through Theodore Payne?
Through G3, no.
Oh, through G3. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah,
okay.
So that one was pretty cool to do as well. And this was kind of a little, almost a refresher, because they did talk about the soils, native plants, the regions and everything. So that was pretty neat. So I would like to
Nice.
thank you for teaching the class
You're
so
welcome.
great. That was
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks
so
for
much.
participating, and everybody
I
participating
tried.
makes it more
Thank you.
exciting.
Yes, thank you
Yes.
for teaching this class. I'm super appreciative as well. And that's a really cool haircut, Noe.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I know. pompadour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
no.
like that you busted out the last class. We didn't even know that was
I
happening the
know.
whole time.
Yeah, that's yeah. I'm on my way out right now. So I was
Yeah.
listening to everything though, but I get very busy and you know, I listen, and then I also read the flashcards at work, and actually at work what we're doing now is a lot of pollinator gardens. So
Nice.
you know, like I said, like, so it's really great information that you've given, especially with the plants and the native plants. And I wish we would do a little bit more natural, because we do a lot of hardscape. So
Yeah.
just because like it's a little bit more, it's like less messy than mulch.
Yeah.
So it makes it look a little bit different. So, but I actually really enjoyed the class. Thank you so
Cool.
much.
I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks for telling me.
No, thank you
And
so
glad
much.
you got, yeah, and it is time, so I'll let everybody go. I like, no way, you gotta go, and we all gotta go. Yeah, but yeah, enjoy your pruning class tomorrow, if for those of you who are going. And thank you guys for attending all of the classes, or whichever ones you did attend. And we'll see you